Hey folks, we're back in Frankenstein. We're looking at volume 1, chapters 3 through 4, the 1818 edition. This is the third of three brief videos covering these two chapters. And we're looking at three questions as we go through here. What do these chapters reveal about the character of Victor Frankenstein? What do they reveal about the makeup of Victor's creation? And what do they hint at concerning the consequences for Victor's choices? We're just going to look briefly today at some of the consequences of Victor's choices. I did want you to see this. This is kind of cool. This is Mary Shelley's manuscript for Victor Frankenstein. I'm sorry, for Frankenstein. I get my names mixed up. And the events that you read about here in this chapter, right, they're going to begin in November and they're going to end in spring of the following year. So there's several months that pass over the course of chapter 4. You might recall, especially if you just watched this video, Victor's attempts to create the monster, to create his being, which he does. We're not entirely sure of the way he did it. Here's a thing talking about galvanism. Make sure you look that up because it's kind of interesting. Mary Shelley certainly was aware of that. So anyhow, just kind of cool thing. But anyhow, what happens? He creates the monster 1 o'clock in the morning, sometime in November. The monster comes to life. He's incredibly disappointed by it. And so what's weird is, what does he do? Is he goes to sleep. He goes to sleep. Yeah, Victor goes into his bedroom and he paces for a bit and throws himself down on the bed, doesn't put on his PJs. He just falls asleep in his clothes. He's going to have this weird dream that we're going to talk about. Well, while Victor is napping, the monster is up and at him, and he comes in at some point and he moves this curtain that would have surrounded the bed of Victor, and Victor sees that, and that doesn't go well. Victor says that the creation tries to reach for him as if to detain him. That's Victor's take on it. And the creation grunts a little bit. There's no words. The monster is going to become incredibly eloquent, but not yet. He eventually will be very well read and well spoken and very persuasive, but not yet. Right now, he is a newborn, some sort of hybrid being made of human and animal parts that's staring at him. So with his work done, how does the good doctor respond? He's disgusted by what he sees. He eventually falls asleep. He has this weird dream. He's repelled by the monster, and then he flees. Of course, anyhow, I'll talk about something else here in just a second. You should notice here the consequences, right? We're trying to think about the consequences. Here's Victor's big thing. He's finally achieved this. But Victor looks awful. Okay, Victor looks horrible. So watch for the effect on Victor's health of his having become the modern Prometheus. He becomes ragged, he becomes wretched, he becomes more creaturely at times in the process and as a consequence of creating the monster. So perhaps the creator bears the creation's image. There are definitely plot problems that exist in this novel, as probably is true in all novels, right? I mean, look, Henry Clerval shows up just in the nick of time. And where does the monster? I mean, Victor doesn't want to have that monster there, and for some reason the monster disappears. And how come none of the neighbors say anything? And why doesn't Henry Clerval say something when he stays with Victor for months as Victor's nurse to help him out because Victor's in really bad physical shape? What does he think about that apartment of his? There's even a servant that comes and serves him breakfast. I know, read the description of the apartment, and the apartment's on top and it's separated and all that kind of stuff, but it's a possible plot problem. So what happens is Victor, like I said earlier, he's going to fall asleep and he wakes up and boom, there's the monster in front of him, which leads to this really weird dream, y'all. So here's Victor's dream, but I think there's a hint of things to come. This is from chapter 4. He says, "But it was in vain I slept, indeed, but I was disturbed by the wildest dreams." Even he says this one's wild. "I thought I saw Elizabeth," that's his betrothed, or that will be his betrothed. That is his gal, also his cousin, and someone he grew up with, and sometimes his sister. But it's not weird. Anyhow, "I thought I saw Elizabeth in the bloom of health, walking in the streets of Ingolstadt," that's the town, right? The college town he's in. "Delighted and surprised, I embraced her. But as I imprinted the first kiss on her lips, love's true kiss. He says, but as I imprinted the first kiss on her lips, they became livid. Elizabeth's lips became livid with the hue of death. Her features appeared to change, and I thought that I held the corpse of my dead mother in my arms. A shroud enveloped her form, and I saw the grave worms crawling in the folds of the flannel. What in the world? He's just created his monster. He falls asleep. He has this nice dream where Elizabeth has given him a big old smack on the lips, and then all of a sudden she dies and she transfigures into his dead mother. I will tell you this, all sorts of literary critics have had quite a time with this particular scene, and you can look up and see what they thought about it. I think, though, there's a bit of a hint here of something, and it's not a good one for Elizabeth. Perhaps there's a bit of a prediction that's taking place here. If you were to look at Frankenstein's dream on your own, these are some questions you consider. What's the immediate context? What's odd about this? What's odd or interesting about the dream? What kind of questions do you have about the dream? You could then put this dream in the context of the book. Are there other dreams that take place in Frankenstein? You could do, for instance, you could get an electronic edition of the novel. You could do a search for dream, nightmares, see if you find anything. You could then look at books online and do a search for that term. And what do you find about dreams in general? Anyhow, this is just an interesting thing for you all to consider as another possible point of research. I will tell you this. Sorry, my voice cracks all the time. Mary Shelley describes in her 1831 preface, which I hope you've read because it's really a good preface, she describes how she came up with this idea. And I just want you to look at this because it really parallels what we just read today. He says, this is Mary Shelley's 1831 preface. You and I have looked at the 1818 one by her husband, by Percy, but this is Mary's actual preface from 1831. She says, many and long were the conversations between Lord Byron and Shelley, to which I was a devout but nearly silent listener. During one of these various philosophical doctrines, I'm doing a very bad job of reading. During one of these various philosophical doctrines were discussed, and among others, the nature of the principle of life, and whether there was any probability of its ever being discovered and communicated. Well, that's what Victor's been after. They talked of the experiments of Dr. Darwin. Now, she qualifies this. I speak not of what the doctor really did or said that he did, but, as more to my purpose, of what was then spoken of as having been done by him, who preserved a piece of vermicelli in a glass case, till by some extraordinary means it began to move with voluntary motion. Not thus, after all, would life be given. Perhaps a corpse would be reanimated. Galvanism, there's your term to look up, had given token of such things. Perhaps the component parts of a creature might be manufactured, brought together, and endued with vital warmth. This is the conversation going on back in 1816 when they were about to have this ghost story competition, right? Frightful must it be, for supremely frightful would be the effect of any human endeavor to mock the stupendous mechanism of the creator of the world. I just want to point out to you, you're seeing then the really heretical idea of the novel in early 19th century Christian England. So she brings that out with that sentence. His success, the person who would do this, his success would terrify the artist. He would rush away from his odious handiwork, horror-stricken. Doesn't this sound like Victor once he creates life? He would hope that, left to itself, the slight spark of life which he had communicated would fade. So maybe that's Victor's thinking. If he goes to bed, the thing's just going to die. He had done many experiments, and not all of them had been successful. This one succeeds, maybe it will fail. He says that that this thing which had received such imperfect animation would subside into dead matter, and he might sleep in the belief that the silence of the grave would quench forever the transient existence of the hideous corpse which he had looked upon as the cradle of life. He sleeps, but he has awakened. This is the Creator. He opens his eyes. Behold, the horrid thing stands at his bedside, opening his curtains and looking on him with yellow, watery, but speculative eyes. There's again something that is, the eyes are what really get to Victor Frankenstein. Night waned upon this talk, and even the witching hour had gone by before we retired to rest. This is Mary Shelley talking about her own experience again, 1816. When I placed my head on my pillow, I did not sleep, nor could I be said to think. My imagination, unbidden, possessed and guided me, gifting the successive images that arose in my mind with a vividness far beyond the usual bounds of reverie. I saw, with shut eyes but acute mental vision, I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out, and then, on the working of some powerful engine, show signs of life and stir with an uneasy, half-vital motion. That's the 1831 preface. That's her describing how this vision, I guess you could say, she gets that's going to lead to the creation of the novel. And it really seems to talk about the scene that we've read today. So just remember again, going back to the title about Prometheus and how that keys us into something about the story. In Prometheus, a creator is punished, but also the created in the epigraph complains. Both of those themes we're going to see, we're going to see more as we continue our reading of Frankenstein. You guys have a great day.